So once again, shall I start?
Let me introduce you a bit, Mr.
Okay,
Rituraj.
sure.
Just 1 minute. Thank you so much, dear candidates of EESD journalism. This is the idea of not just Entrepreneurs Ecole, but Mahabahu and Women Ascension to provide you a platform where you can network with on-ground journalists and also mold yourself how you can shape up yourself for freelancing and get the skills for journalism on ground. So, our first guest for today's on ground journalist is Mr. Rituraj Phukan, and he is a district leader in sustainability and environmental advocacy. And as the co founder of Smiley Academy, director of sustainability at InCamp Adventures, and chief operating officer at Walk for Water, Rituraj has dedicated his career to championing environmental causes. His experience as a national coordinator for biodiversity with the Climate Reality Project India, and his work as MAPS ambassador across Assam, Nagaland, and Manipur further solidified his reputation as a powerful voice for global environmental movement. So this is a bit background effort that Mr. Rathiraj does apart from as a climate editor at Mahabahu. So it's an honor for us for having such diverse profile with us, and we are going to learn in this hour um, his insights towards his journey towards journalism. So thank you very much, Mr. Rathiraj, for joining in. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahin. It's once again, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the introduction as well. Uh, at the very outset, at the beginning, let me share that I am uh, not the conventional journalist, as you would say. I did not come from a journalism background. I used to work in the government a long time back, but then I found my calling in environment. I started as a grassroots biodiversity conservation activist, which involves rescue and rearing of some rare species of birds and the mitigation of human-elephant conflict. And later, in around 2013, I thought and I realized that the most important issue that's challenging us is climate change. Is affecting the biodiversity, it's affecting the cultures, lives of people around us. And Assam, where I live in the Eastern Himalayas, has been one of the early impacted regions as well as among the most vulnerable, has been suffering for quite a long time. And I saw a great need for bringing these stories to the world to ensure climate justice for the future generations. As a climate activist, many times I am very dissatisfied by what I see in the global negotiations. I am also UN observer at the UNFCCC climate talks, like the COPs. Every year I go and cover the COPs. Uh, and what keeps me going is that the young generation are so informed, so passionate about Mother Earth. So most of what I write about, most of my features are about biodiversity and climate change and all the interconnected issues. I'm also a member of the NetPro Global Institute and the International Institute of Nutrition Educators. So food, you can understand, is my passion, especially foods of the indigenous people. So I always say that having access to the food that our ancestors had access to should be part of the conversation about climate justice. I myself belong to the Ahom community, the Thai people who live in Northeast India. And there are over 700 indigenous people in India and about 200 or 300 in the Northeast. So we do not have representation in the global negotiations. And has been my endeavor to, through my feature writings, to make sure that these people get a voice at the global forums. So I'm going to share my screen and show you some of the stories that I have had the pleasure of writing, authoring uh, across the years. They're very diverse, they're different styles, but I thought the best way forward would be to share some of this. So I'm going to share my screen now, and do let me know when you can see uh, the tabs. Uh, it is- Are you able to see the tabs?
Yes.
Okay, just give me a moment. Okay, the first story that I would like to share is the changing Karbi foothills, frontiers of conflict. Are you able to see this? Okay, perfect. Right. So, as you know, Assam is among the worst impacted by climate change, and it is also one of the regions which is among the worst affected by human wildlife conflicts. Among all the elephant range countries in the world, we have the most number of casualties both to elephants and humans every year because of the conflict. So I did the story for the Earth's Journalism Network. As you know, it is one of the largest. Internews kind of commissioned this article, and the headline was "The Changing Karbi Foothills: Frontiers of Conflict." So here we looked at how people's lives are being affected. Uh, and we had a lot of photographs here. We also had the embedded the videos. I don't know if the links are here, but this actually looked at the stories of the people at the grassroots, people who would spend their nights guarding their warehouses, guarding their paddy fields from elephant herds. Many a times there will be conflict, there will be retaliation. Elephants would chase the people, people would chase elephants. There will be casualties. Uh, People would die. Sometimes elephants would die. But one of the drivers of this conflict was climate change. The entire region vegetation cover has been changing, and the driver is the changing rainfall patterns and increased temperatures, because of which more and more elephants are forced down from the foothills into paddy fields. And we saw some very interesting responses. Like if you see in this photograph, people are carrying these banana saplings with the belief that if they plant these banana at the foothills, then the passing elephant herds will come and feast on the banana and then go back to the hill without coming into the village, without coming into the paddy fields, and not, they would then be able to have a good harvest. So these people have lived with elephants for a very, very long time. And the main focus of this article was to explore why a relationship that had existed between man and elephants for millennia, for generations, has suddenly become so intense, where people started to retaliate violently, and elephants are dying, and people are dying. And what we found during the course of this, research for this article is that in the past, the elephants would come in one particular season and go back, and people would actually worship the elephants in India. Like there's the elephant god Ganesha, and most people would not harm elephants. In fact, sometimes if the elephant dies, people will even have a ceremony for them. And we saw in this area that many people still had these relics, elephant bones in their houses, and that is used for worship actually. And they also believe that if they keep a bone in the house, the elephants would not come. So we found a lot of interesting things, and this article kind of covered all of that, to bring the stories, to bring the the feelings that have changed. And finally, my emphasis was to uh, focus on the fact that climate change is one of the drivers of human wildlife conflicts in our region, particularly human elephant conflict. Now, this has, this is something that is still ignored. Even I wrote this article back in 2019. But even now, when we talk about what is driving increased conflict between humans and elephants, and it is a big concern, not only where I live in Assam, but also in all the states where elephants are found in India or in Bangladesh or in Nepal and Sri Lanka and other Asian countries, as well as in African countries. So it's a very, very important issue. I thought this feature was very well received, and we interviewed a lot of forest officials as well. And for example, we had the special principal chief conservator of forests, Dr. Abhijit Rava, and he said the increasing instances of human elephant casualties in the Karbi foothills have made it one of the major uh, human elephant conflict affected zones of the 19, not people. When you talk about elephants per se, when you talk about conservation requirements, people tend to talk about Africa. So my intention was to bring the plight of Asian elephants to the forefront, particularly the often neglected issue of human elephant conflict and climate change being a driver of the uh, issue. So then we focus on some of the reasons. What happens when climate change happens? How does climate change actually drive this conflict? Now, if you look at this photo, this used to be a prime elephant habitat. It is full of grass, and there used to be a water hole here close by, which is also now not visible. And what you see here is all invasive creepers and invasive species of plants. They have covered the entire vegetation. And there are studies to prove that invasive species are increasing because of increase in temperature. So you need to do the research to make give substance to a story, and then from the grassroots you need to prove that there is this connection. So it is very clear from this photograph that the entire elephant habitat has been degraded because of climate change. And the direct consequence is vegetation change, and because of which we are seeing more and more conflict. So this is how I structure the story, and then we have a particular area of study place called Dhul Pahar, where a lot of elephant herds to come and graze. But now we see that the habitat is fragmented because there are tea gardens on one side, and then there is agricultural farms, there's encroachment, and then there is stone mining. So all of this has come. Then we also looked at what are the current laws, what are the Supreme Court judgments, and then what are the viewpoints of different activists. So this kind of covered the entire story in a whole. So when you are expecting to do a feature, you want to not just present your side of the story, but the perspective of all the stakeholders. So in this, I covered not just the people who are affected, but also the people who are doing something or trying to do something to mitigate the conflict, the viewpoint of forest officers, the viewpoint of civil society, viewpoint of other activists. So, and the existing laws and how they have been implemented. So I think this was a complete feature. And then we're continuing. We looked at how the elephant habitat is destroyed by this particular quarry, which has come up where elephants used to graze. So all of it is part of the story. I, for me personally, the most important part, I think, was how elephants, from being an object of worship, became a nuisance that people had to retaliate. So we followed this entire trajectory of how things have changed, and we found out from the local forest officers as well as the people that um, there are multiple driver of this conflict, not just climate change, but others like habitat fragmentation, roads, unplanned development. uh, all of this. And then we also looked at what can be done to mitigate that in a traditional way. And we found some very, very interesting concepts like Hasti Bhog or Ganesh Bhog, where people would offer things to the elephants to appease them and hoping that they would not come. And sometimes it worked. We saw with our own eyes how they were working. So this is what I was talking about. People are offering rice and bananas and other grain, and after this, the people go back, and after a while, we see the elephants come. They eat all that, and I documented that. Actually, I took my camera. We had a video camera, and we were watching people do it, and we saw that it was working. The elephants would just eat this and then move away. They would not enter the village. They would not enter the paddy fields. So, we may not scientifically be able to explain this, but this exists. This is still going on in many parts of where I live and other parts of the world as well. So these are the stories that we wanted to bring out in front. Now, then we looked at what are the compensation. So this was quite a comprehensive feature, and that's what I wanted to share this with you. We looked at what are the guidelines for compensation, whether they're actually being paid, and why there are delays, and how we can have more clarity on the compensation being paid. So we looked at all of this as well. And here are some examples of how elephants, get break down the granaries where uh, food grains are stored. And interestingly, we also found that they not only come for the rice, but they also come for other things. Like, if people store salt, they come to take the salt. They break the wall and take the salt. If they store fruits like jackfruit, they might, come and take that. And many people here are tribal communities who make their own rice beer, and the elephants used to get drunk on that. And when they smell that people are storing rice beer in the houses, then they will come and attack the house and drink the beer and go away. So they're very interesting things, and I think this story also helped understand the various facets of conflict, not just why, but also what are the responses and what are the road ahead. So this is one story I wanted to share. And at this point, I think I will ask if anybody has any questions before I go on to the next story. Shall I go on to the next one then?
Yes, we are very much mesmerized with the stories. We move towards the next one. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we will look at a few more. Uh, so this is a journal on mental health by the Mariwala Health Initiative. Um, this was again one feature that I'm very proud of, because it looked at something which has not been widely covered, and it is I headline it as Change Destinies in the Eastern Himalayan region, again with a subtitle, How Climate Change Has Undermined the Development Aspirations of Marginalized Communities. Now, my region is a flood-prone region. It is also prone to other related issues like erosion, riverbank erosion, loss of livelihoods, lot of farms because of floods. So this was a couple of years back, I think, maybe 3 years back. And again, it was very, very current. And we started that year, the road between where I live, my hometown, and the largest city of our state was flooded. And thousands of people were living on the road. So the story started with that. And then we looked at how the different countries affected by such natural disasters were dealing with the stress that young people are feeling because of being affected by this climate induced or climate change driven disasters. So then we looked at the global survey and trying to bring the global studies and research that existed and connect it with what people were feeling in the ground. So this was a different type of story from what I shared with you earlier. because it was something new for me as well. The domain of, I'm not a psychologist or a psychoanalyst, but the domain of mental health was very interesting because nobody has done any study. When the floods happen, sometimes the people are marooned for 2, 3 weeks, sometimes even months. And during that time, obviously, the children do not get to school. Sometimes they might even lose their books and bags to the floodwaters, right? And what happens to them then? How does it affect them mentally? Do they not suffer from PTSD or depression or anxiety? So all of this was very, very new. And then we looked at the numbers, how many people are affected by the floods. And I kind of, you know, went and interviewed some of the kids and see, what is happening with them, how they're coping with, uh, missing school. And what happens if this happens for a couple of times, like 2 years in a row or like 3 years in a row, many children never go back to school. So there's a complete dropout, which means that they lose their life, their opportunity at a better, life, right? So this is a very big problem in most of the flood-prone regions of the world. I know in Pakistan as well as um, India, and the entire region in South Asia is very, very prone to floods. Bangladesh as well, and we have no detailed study of how it affects people from the perspective of mental health. So for children, when it disrupts educational and occupational opportunities, then there's a question of when they go back to school, usually they join a class that is lower than what they were maybe in the previous year. So there's also the question of the stigma, the discrimination, social marginalization as well. The elderly people also experience a lot of difficulties in terms of because of their limited mobility and the ability to understand like what is happening, right? Then indigenous people are always at the front lines and they have so much to lose because of what is happening due to climate change. And believe me, there are hardly any studies to see what kind of mental health issues are there among remote and indigenous people. But what I feel after working so many years with the indigenous communities, that the issue of mental health is more perhaps relevant to semi-urban and urban areas. So that is what we tried to bring out in this report. This was a big feature as well. So, and then we went to the global assessment of what Assam is in terms of climate impacts or in terms of climate vulnerability. So it is one of the eight most in the world in Assam. Sorry, in India, the most flood affected districts are in Assam, and then 60% of the entire region is vulnerable to floods. And the most affected, who suffer the most, are the children, the elderly, the women, and people with pre-existing illnesses, especially mental illnesses. So this is again a study that helped bring, I think it is a different kind of study. I think it's more academic than most of the other reports I did. Then I tried to connect it with the loss of forest cover that we are seeing here, which is contributing directly to the rapid floods, which we call flash floods in many areas, especially semi-urban and urban areas. And what are the methods that indigenous people and local communities are implementing to mitigate it themselves, outside of government intervention. So this is a different story again. We went to the camps of the flood affected to look at how elderly people, were lamenting that, whatever they did for their entire life, whatever little savings they used to have is all gone because in the last like 10 years, the floods have become more and more intense and frequent. And because of that, they have lost their lifetime of work to nothing. They're still in poverty. So again, we brought this up. Then we looked at the impact in developed countries like US and Japan and how they're coping with mental health and why we cannot have that similar kind of response here. So yeah. I think, yeah, that's it. Again, I would just have a short break here to understand if anybody has any questions. Uh, these are the two feature stories that I wanted to share. Maybe I will look at another one. This is actually copy protected. I think it is published by the American Journal of Economics and Sociology. Again, more academic. This is entitled "People's Response to the Climate Emergency in India." Uh, Here I kind of looked at the relevance of somebody like Greta Thunberg to the climate movement in India from the youth perspective. Okay, I know Greta has been incredible to the climate movement. She has mobilized millions and millions all over the world. But what happens in a rural, mostly rural country like India or Pakistan or Afghanistan? Is somebody like Greta Thunberg able to inspire action or able to inspire change? We looked at that in this feature, and we found that what indigenous people and local communities here would actually subscribe to or would like to see are people, young people, become climate leaders from their own communities and go present their stories to the world and bring the global solutions to them. So we kind of advocated for having more local leaderships representing the different affected people at the global negotiation. I do not have this article. I do have it in Word format. Uh, if you want to read it, either you can look it up here in Willy's, or maybe I can share it with the team so that you can, have a look at it. Because this particular issue in the online version is protected by a paywall, so I can send you the Word document so you can just read it for free. Okay, and then okay, let me look at two other stories. These are more like reporting from COP. I was at the last COP when the Financial Express, one of the most important newspapers in our country, wanted to do a couple of different stories, and they wanted me to send it from Dubai, where I was there for the COP. And I thought, instead of focusing on the actual negotiations, instead of focusing on what is happening, let me share my perspective. And this is the first story, and then I'll come to the second one of what I think, because many people are saying, okay, these COPs are, not having the outcome that we want. They are not, they're just wasting time and money, and they are not doing their work. But what I see in the COPs every year I go there is quite different. I know people are working very hard to find solution. It's not easy when there are 196 countries negotiating to have their own point of view registered in the outcome document. It is not at all easy. Sometimes I see people spend the entire day just arguing for which word to be included, which word not to be included. So this is not a story like the ones you saw earlier. It is more of an analytical story from my perspective. So uh, this is also available online. If you go to the financial, if you just Google Financial Express and my name, Rituraj Phukan, and maybe COP28, you can get this article and the next one as well. Both of these are available online. And, I think this again provides a different perspective. These are not a feature story per se, but yeah, featured articles on the COP.
Mr. Rituraj, Ms. Sumaya has
Yeah,
some question from you. Ms. Sumaya?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question that
go ahead.
how what was your result in this research and the destroying? Afghanistan have a similar situation. Like we lost everything in our country. nowadays we kind of imagine in our mental problems and limited resource for recovering. And what is your outcome about this research, and how the sensitive situation can change or alter even you bring or you create. You think that the older or young generation can lead kind of leaders to bring a new situation or a good thing in their country. So what is the income that how we can control this kind of situation or this kind of mental problems in our country or in your region, even in your.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think mental health issue per se is something that is not very uh, well studied or not given the importance that it should be in our region, in South Asia, and I think all of Asia, especially young children, and the stress that they suffer, the anxiety that they are suffering because of all these impacts, the impacts of wars, the impacts of climate change. Uh, when you see people all over the world, young people making so much of contribution to change, and then here you are stuck in a place where you are not able to do anything despite not, despite the willingness to do it. So I think staying within the parameters of the law, we can still start to make yourself heard by bringing out the people's stories, by bringing out the mental health issues that are connected to the disruption of the natural ecosystems, to the disruption of the climate. So these stories, when people know about what is happening in Afghanistan, people know about what is happening in Pakistan, people know about the Pakistan floods, all of it, right? But what they hear is mostly the newspaper stories, the news headlines of how many people are affected, how many deaths, the numbers, and that is, sometimes it may not touch the people who matter in the right way. What people want to hear are people stories. Suppose you talk about a particular family and how they're affected. You talk about a woman, and maybe her children are suffering from some kind of mental health issues because of these impacts and consequences. And when people hear that, they make the connection, and that is how the young generation, I think, in our regions should take leadership. When they are taking up journalism, firstly, you have to be brave, you have to be speaking the truth, and you have to speak the truth from the point of view of the victims. So you want to bring out the people's stories, not from your own perspective, but from the people's perspective. I think there is a lot of scope to do that. Of course, there are challenges, understand that, but within the legality, within the law of what is allowed and what is not, we need to ensure that the world starts to hear. And even if they hear it as a whisper now, maybe in a couple of years that whisper will become a noise. So that is what we want to start, bit by bit, piece by piece. We want to bring out the stories from the grassroots. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, yes, partly.
I do have some question. Um, First of all, you have mentioned that you just working in government section, and after some time you just decided to move from government section to journalism. Somehow it's complicated, like one side is government, and when you're just coming through the media, it's private things. What really inspired you to change your fields from government and come over with media? Secondly, I'm just asking my question and then you can just start answering all of them. Secondly, I know that as a freelance, you need to work on a report like somehow for a long time, maybe sometimes for 1 week. My question is at all, how long you just need for a research report to just start it from the first and just to end up it? and how long it needs, how like weeks, months, and everything. And the third one, as a freelancer, I know what's the difference between a freelancer and other journalists which are just working for an exclusive media. If possible, to explain for others that what is the difference or what's between a freelancer and other journalists. What benefits a freelancer have that other journalists haven't that? Yeah, that's also.
Okay, the first question, okay, from the government to media. Well, I did not jump directly from government to media. Actually, I was in government a long time back, like over 2.5 decades back, for a very short period of time, maybe 7 years or 6 years. And then I decided that I want to work for nature, and that is where I started working in conservation first, and then becoming a climate activist. And I was a climate, I still am a activist first. I still am a climate action, climate justice advocate first, indigenous people's rights, and a food advocate first before I'm a writer. So journalism is something that I was invited to do, and that I love to do, because I feel that the most important way to tell the stories, it's not just giving a TEDx talk or writing a blog, but actually reaching out through the mainstream media. And the best way I could do that is by offering myself to work like for a publication like Mahabahu, or to like you said, for other freelance for other publications like Financial Express and Business Insider and all that. The second question, I think, was sorry, what was the second question about? I know the third one, but yeah, second one.
The second question was about how long a research report needs.
Oh yeah.
I know it might be
Okay.
different for every journalist. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, for me, because I work with grassroots communities most of my time, but I also go to global events like the COPs and the even negotiations. So I am able to identify the gap between what is actually happening on the ground and what is being discussed in the global negotiations. And my endeavor is always to make the connect between what is the stakeholders at the grassroots talking about, and what is being ignored or what is not being talked about in the global negotiations. And to make that connect is what I always endeavor to do. And how long does it take? Well, for me, it's a continuous process, right? Because I work at the grassroots, I may be working on water at different parts of the country and different forums. And then I have this entire series of things building up. Okay, this is the story. This is what is happening in terms of water. In Assam, there is floods. In Telangana, there is water scarcity, but both are connected to climate change. It is water, but in one place it is abundance of water or excess water. In another place it is less water. So how do you make the connections? And it is ultimately connected to climate impacts. But that is my endeavor. And then it is just a quick example I gave, but biodiversity has so many opportunities. When you go to a forest, there are 100 stories they're all around you, and you need to pick and choose and how much time you spend. So I don't focus on, okay, I'm going to do this story and I'm going to spend 3 months on this or 4 months on this. But yeah, if I'm doing a commissioned article like for Earth Journalism or Internews, then maybe it will take me 3 months to do the research, because I want to be more specific. I want to look at all the stakeholder point of view, like the story about the elephants, right? The first one that I shared. So we need to bring in all the inputs, and then it might take me 3 months. But I would say sometimes it is a continuous period of research and understanding that goes on, over and over and over through months, maybe even years. And thirdly, well, I think for all of you who are intending to be career journalists, it is important that you probably start off, it is more secure financially, as well as, for career, future career prospects, to be working for some publication and then go on beyond that. Once you establish your own reputation, your own readership, maybe in the future, you could think of a career as a freelancer. If you have a different day job, then you can always be a freelancer. That is, of course, always an option. But well, the gap between what a journalist is, who is a dedicated full-time journalist, who is a freelancer, and what is their future, is rapidly and very quickly evolving. These days, everybody is a journalist. Everybody has a mobile phone. They're reporting. They're going to the field. They're shooting a video, and they're having their own commentary and publishing it on YouTube, on social media. And sometimes you see that they have more viewership than even the mainstream media. So that what is journalism is evolving, and the I think the differences between definitions within journalistic circles are becoming blurred. uh, I don't know what the future will be, but I guess as more and more people evolve into uh, YouTube viewership rather than mainstream news. And sometimes in some of our countries, mainstream news is often perceived to be biased. So independent freelance journalists are sometimes perceived to be, it may not always be so, but they are perceived to be more like independent. These are all like points of view. These are all evolving things. I think we need to find our place in the future. I think for the youngsters, at least, it is probably the best option for you guys to be starting on a more solid ground and be part of a reputed publication, at least at the beginning of your careers, right?
Thank you, Mr. Rajarat. We have Mr. Wahid raising hand for quite a long time. Wahid Beta, if you have some questions.
Is my voice is audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sir, I was saying that addressing climate change requires urgent global action. So as we're like in the way of being a journalist, so how can journalists effectively communicate the complex science of climate change to a journal audience? It's a very complicated stuff. We have to communicate each and everything. We have to explain each and everything in a such a way that they understand. Everyone knows the situation right now. The climate change is like, uh, and the in the current situation, each and everything is getting changed. The future of our planet depends on the our ability to mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to the changes already underway. And what are the most important skills, sir, you are suggesting us, or what are the most important skills or qualities a journalist should develop? Uh, as you told that you are not a journalist, but there are some requirements, there are some stuff that we must do. A good journalist is a one who is explaining each and everything in a such a way that they can convince people, they can share the exact thing. So I hope you got my question, sir. I was.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great, very relevant question. And climate change touches every aspect of our life. The science is complicated, as you rightly pointed out. It is evolving, it is voluminous. It is just not possible to keep up with everything that is happening. But as a journalist, if you are devoted to climate change, I think the least you could do, the first point would be to look at all the publications that are coming up. So you keep up to date with the science, right? It is not just the IPCC assessment reports, but there are a lot of other reports that are being published. every year. At least I would say there are 6 or 7 major ones, and that helps us with understanding the science, the impacts, and what needs to be done. And once we have that, then what we want to report, I guess, is stories from the ground, stories from the people. There are two aspects, of course. You must have heard of Mr. Al Gore, former US Vice President, who in 2007 won the Nobel Peace Prize for his documentary An Inconvenient Truth, right? So I'm a climate reality leader trained by Mr. Gore. And what Mr. Gore did was uh, to he brought out the my laptop is running out of 1 minute. So what Mr. Al Gore did was he brought out the science of climate change from the scientific realm and explained it to the masses through his book, An Inconvenient Truth, right? And following the book, he also made a documentary which helped people around the world understand what climate change is. So Mr. Gore is often credited with bringing this climate change uh, information from the scientific realm to the masses. And I think in his example, we have perhaps the best communicator. He may not be a journalist, but he made perhaps the most important contribution to the dissemination of climate change knowledge. He's not a scientist. He was just a politician, right? Who famously lost the elections in 2002. But he spent the next 5 years understanding what climate change is about. And with his background as a senator who was often fighting for the environment, he was able to engage with the best scientists, understand the science, and he has become the most effective communicator in the world. He has written numerous op-eds, feature stories. He has been interviewed. He has made films, documentaries, and I think he is one of the persons that every journalist should aspire to become, because uh, he proves that even a layman can understand the science and help communicate it to the masses through the language of a layman. And that makes you a good journalist. What is a journalist? First of all, is a good communicator, and that's what you aspire to be. So, and besides him, there are a lot of other scientists who have themselves taken it upon, as their duty to communicate to the world in the form of articles, interviews, books, and other media. And some examples I could give is Dr. Michael Mann, who is also a very famous climate scientist, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, very, very famous climate scientist and climate communicator, who explain to the world in the easiest of terms about the science of climate change, the impacts and consequences, and the need for global collective action, how everybody can be involved in mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. So all of this is already available in the public domain. And first of all, and it's not just true for a lot of activists are also journalists, right? So it is very, very important that first and foremost, you are an informed activist. And by default, you are also an informed journalist. Yes, read the reports, read the science, understand them, and then be the communicator. You need to be the communicator, depending on who your audience is. I hope that kind of answered your question. It is a tough one, but
Thank you, sir. I got it.
Question as well. So, for example, thank you for first of all sharing your work. Like, I understood what you do exactly. Like, I wanted to ask, how do you approach a story? Like, for example, climate change, environment. These are the topics that are highlighted like by almost everyone nowadays. but what's your personal approach towards a story, towards a topic? Because there are certain kinds that people follow, and you have seen, for example, 100 journalists talking talking about the same topic. How do you personalize it? How do you like add your own touch towards it? And like there
That
are for example, there are few things that are banned to say, or maybe a censor, like if we write about them, they are censored. So like how do you deal with those things, like when you are writing and when you are publishing your work?
the reason I shared the features at the beginning is because I wanted to, you know, portray that I always depend at the grassroots to bring out the stories and then connect it to the global perspective. So I think your question is so relevant to what we are discussing here. I think what, to the future of journalism as well. What people want to hear from a journalist, a good journalist, is stories from the grassroots, local stories. So if I'm based in Assam and if I talk about Maharashtra or some other part of India or about Pakistan or Afghanistan, uh, well, I can do my research and write about it, but I think it will not have the personal touch that is required. So when I'm based in the Eastern Himalayas, it gives me more credibility to talk about what I'm seeing and feeling around me, what I am dealing with myself as somebody who is living with climate change in the Eastern Himalayas. So I have my own perspective. I have the perspective of my fellow people living here. I have the perspective of all the indigenous communities and other stakeholders who are suffering the same impacts as me. And that makes me a voice of all these people. So it gives me a great different perspectives to portray in my work, right? And to bring it all together is what I intend to do. I think what is my what my exact job is. So I think to focus on local perspective in this globalized fight for climate change, where journalists are playing such a vital role, is very, very important, particularly for loss and damage and mitigation. We are going to this COP in Baku happening in the next 2 or 3 months, COP 29, will be having a new definition of finance, right? New quantified goal on finance, and that will pave the way for allocation of funds for adaptation and loss and damage in the future. So what we want to do is to bring out stories from Afghanistan, Pakistan, India to the forefront, because we are living at the front lines of climate change. Our people are suffering. And when you bring out the stories from the grassroots, the people are able to see which areas need to be the focus of distribution of loss and damage funds, adaptation funds, mitigation, of course, the government is doing. So I think so that is a key area of work for all of us. Well, I think we don't have any more questions. Okay, go ahead. I see a raised hand, Halima.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I want to ask that as a professional journalist, this is your responsibility to raise the voice of the people. But here in Afghanistan, the situation is not like other countries. Sometimes you see the issues, or you see the topics that you need to cover, but you should think of your security and safety first, because if you cover the issues or the topics, and if you write about these topics and share this, you are putting yourself in risk. So how we can handle that kind of situations, that it's your responsibility to write about that issues, but you can't because you're putting yourself in risk.
I know that's a great challenge, and I'm really not, I think I don't even understand how hard it is for you uh, and other people who are living in such conditions, uh, and the risk involved. But what I will say is that your life and your family's life is most important. So it is perhaps for the good of all that if you could uh, take up with the authorities beforehand about what you want to write, maybe, and you know, and so that in the future you are not blamed for any wrong impact, or for bringing notice to the wrong issues that they may perceive to be a threat. For example, I think I was just speaking about loss and damage. And if you are able to convey the importance of loss and damage and mitigation, and adaptation funds for development of the, uh, poor countries in the future, the global South countries in the future, and what these stories could bring to the people, or in terms of funding in the future to the government, that might earn some support. I'm just thinking out of the box. I'm not sure even if this is going to work, but you know how best to deal with the ground situation. You are perhaps the best person to understand what is allowed, what is not. And I would just say that, yeah, life is the most important, and within what is allowed, you try your best to convey the stories that you want to convey.
All right, thank you, Halima. We have Shukriya next. Yes, Shukriya?
Yeah, go ahead, Shukriya.
Uh, Thank you so much for letting me ask my question. Actually, my question is if I want to write a report or maybe my articles about like the situation in Afghanistan, about can you hear me clearly?
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe you
that's
can
great.
just, yeah, speak up a little bit. Yeah.
Like if I want to write my articles or maybe my report papers about like Afghan girls, especially what's happening in their mind and hearts in these hard situations which are they are facing, and like what are the advices do you want to tell me that I should put on my articles or my reports?
Well, as a journalist, I'd always say that you need to focus on what is the truth, right? If the ground situation is challenging for the girls, for women currently, it is always a challenge with the security and the threats that you are facing. But if you can, please always speak the truth, but always remain safe. I mean, that's all I can say. Uh, I don't know how bad the persecution is, if you are being subjected to any kind of uh, threats because of what you write, then if that's the case, that would be really, really concerning. But yeah, I have been reading all the stories coming out of Afghanistan. I think it is very, very important that for the moment you must live with the reality. Uh, you can only write the stories uh, as long as you are safe.
Okay, thank you so much.
Well, we have another question from Supriya on the text, and my next question is the format of the report important? Like, what is it really important? in a report paper. It's a content, it's message, it's format. I think content is always the most important. Whatever format it is, the content is most important, because if you just have the message and you are not having the content to back it up, it won't work. If your content is good, the message gets delivered by itself, and it doesn't matter what format you use actually. As I said earlier, the world of journalism is evolving so much. I think all kinds of formats will keep making impacts in the different areas.
Thank you, Mr. Rituraj. I would really request you to please guide them in a very short manner that how they should make up their mind and practice their schedule as they're practicing along their different activities with their daily life as well, so that they can mold themselves um, as a better journalist, writer, activist, however they want to pursue this, to tap the community in a very efficient manner.
I think the young people here are perhaps, the best generation to make an impact. We are seeing the proliferation of influencers all over the world, and most of them are young people who are armed with the technology they need. They have the internet. We never had the internet. You have the YouTube and other, Instagram and all the other channels. We never had all of that. You have stories, you have the science all available for research online. You can do it from your home. You don't even need to go out to the field, and you have the ability to communicate, make the informed pitch. Like you do at the like a like a startup, and YouTube would be a great way of communicating. And I think as more and more young people come up with this with their channels, with their content that intends to improve the plight of fellow human beings, not just the environment and not just the climate, even uh, like we talked about the plight of girls, the women in different countries. When you start speaking, you are influencing so many others with your voice. You are empowering others to speak out themselves as well. And you are creating positivity in a way that could, be so forceful in nation building. You're creating positivity where many others like you who are in the similar conditions are maybe despondent, maybe having mental health issues. But when they look at your video, they see that, okay, here is somebody who is starting to speak out, going out to the world about what is happening, asking for help, looking at different avenues of improving our lives, improving where we live, how we live, and all that. And that really is a powerful tool you have. So utilize it, make full use of it. You could start creating contents and change the world from your home. And this was never the case in the past.
Thank you so much for making this very interacting and really beautiful session. We were quite nervous before having you here because we didn't know what to ask you and how to ask you by looking at your profile, but you made it so easy for us to interact with you. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure all the candidates would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. If that's okay with you, they would like to follow
Yeah,
you.
of course.
And we would like to call you again in future if we are ready with the work which aligns with your vision. So thank you once again. Candidates, if you have any questions, any last remarks, please let us know.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I would love to connect with all of you. And best wishes. Be safe. Use your pen. Use your YouTube. Use your content to change the world. I think the future generations are already doing it, and you guys are, you could do it too.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you
Bye
so
bye.
much. Thank you. Take care.